Hey guys, welcome to a new FamiStudio tutorial. FamiStudio 2.3.0 was just released and I thought I'd record a new series of tutorials to go along with it. Just like last time, we're going to be making a song from scratch in less than 1 hour. No prior knowledge required. So you don't need to know about chiptune, about the NES, or about music softwares in general. I'm going to be teaching you everything you need to know to make that song. I think everybody liked that approach last time, but unfortunately the tutorial is already 8 months old, and with each new version of FamiStudio that's coming out, it's becoming a little bit more obsolete. So I thought we could use the new features that were added recently to make a bigger, better song and learn more stuff, and that's what we're going to do. So apologies if you watched the previous tutorial. I am going to repeat a lot of stuff that was in there, but believe me, there will be new stuff in there as well that you're going to learn, so please pay attention. And on top of that, I should be releasing a series of mini tutorials that are going to be short 2-minute clips to teach you various aspects of FamiStudio that I cannot cover in this kind of big onboarding tutorial. So be on the lookout for that on YouTube. And the last thing I'm going to mention, next to me I have a little MIDI keyboard. So sometimes if you hear sound coming out of nowhere, it's just me pressing keys on the keyboard. That being said, you do not need a MIDI keyboard to use FamiStudio. We're going to be inputting notes using the mouse, using the QWERTY keyboard, many different ways. So yeah, don't feel left out. The song we're going to make is in the demo songs, which usually on Windows, it's in program file FamiStudio demo song, and it's called tutorial song. I already had it open here. It's definitely a longer and better song than last time, but that being said, it's still extremely mediocre and very average. I am not a composer, I just make the software. Also, it's mostly an excuse to just cram in a bunch of techniques I wanted to talk about, so it's not meant to be good anyway. That being said, we're just going to be using about a quarter of the features that FamiStudio offer. We're not going to be using any audio expansion, we're not going to be using the effects track, arpeggio, all that kind of stuff, but it still should be very helpful. We're going to be making 2 versions of the song. They're going to be identical except for the drums. The first version we're going to be making is going to be using samples, so the drum is going to sound extremely realistic if you want, I mean for the NES. And the second version we're going to be making is not going to be using samples, it's going to be using a more classic drum kit that's reminiscent of Mega Man, that kind of stuff. Because not every game on the NES were using samples, so I thought it'd be important to cover both techniques. All right, let's listen to the song. To play the song, we can just press the play button or press space. All right, now let's listen to a part of the second version. So as you can see here, the drum is is definitely not realistic. We can solo a channel by right-clicking on the channel, and you can mute the channel by clicking on it. So we're gonna listen to just the drums here. As you can see here, it's just relying on the noise channel to make these kind of drum-like sounds, but they do sound very NES, which I do like personally. On the other hand, this is the more realistic version, using actual drum samples. Before we get started, I'm just going to do one last thing, which is give a name to things that we're looking at right now. So what we have open right now, that tutorial song.fms, is what's called a project. And inside a project are 1 or more songs, which you have 2 right now, and the selected song is going to appear here, and it's always going to be in bold. We also have here the 5 channels that the NES supported. The selected channel is going to be in bold, and also we have instruments. The selected instrument is always going to be in bold. So the selected instrument is going to play on the selected channel when you press the keyboard. There you go. Projects can also contain arpeggios. Projects also contain patterns, which are on one of the 5 channels. Inside the patterns, there are notes. Notes refer to instruments, and they are colored by their instruments. So this is kind of the structure of a FamiStudio project. Also, as far as the UI go, this top part is what I call the sequencer. This is where we decide which pattern plays when. This is kind of the high-level structure of the song. At the bottom is the piano roll. This is where we're going to see what's inside a pattern, and this is where we're going to be entering and viewing the notes, that kind of stuff. And on the right side is what I call the Project Explorer, and it just shows your songs, your instrument, and this is where we're going to be editing the properties of our instrument and our properties of songs. The basic controls in FamiStudio, I would describe them as very tactile. This is kind of like using a phone or a tablet. There are no scroll bars, if you see. Everything is done through mouse input. To navigate in FamiStudio, to zoom in and out, you rotate the mouse wheel. This is true for the top and bottom part, for the sequencer and the piano roll. To pan, so to move around, you press the mouse button. Some people don't realize that the mouse wheel is also a mouse button. So you press the mouse wheel and you just drag around. Same for that top part. And to add stuff in general, we're going to be left clicking. So to add notes, here I'm just left clicking. If I want to delete notes, I can just right click on them and they're going to be disappearing. Same for patterns. Here there's an empty space. I can click to create a pattern and I can right click to delete that pattern. While we're on that topic, if you are using a laptop, you should be enabling trackpad controls here. It's going to make your life a lot easier. The controls are going to switch to a control scheme that is a lot more like using a tablet. So you're going to be able to swipe with your fingers, that kind of stuff. It's going to feel a lot more natural. Also, one feature we're going to be using a lot is undo redo, so I might as well mention it. Undo redo is going to be done through the typical Control Z, Control Y, or if you want to click on the toolbar here. So undo redo is very, very solid in FamiStudio. You can undo anything, even if you deleted an entire song. Don't worry about it. Everything just works. One final thing that's going to help you a lot is that you should always be paying attention to the top right part here that is next to that question mark. It's what I call the tooltip area. As you move the mouse over anything in FamiStudio, it's just going to show you everything you can do. It's going to show you what happens if you click, what happens if you right-click, what happens if you double-click, all kinds of keyboard shortcuts that you should know about to optimize your workflow. Please pay attention to that. It's a great way to learn how to use the app. Also, that big question mark next to it, you should be using it. It's going to be linking you to the documentation. So if you want to know about something, if you want to know, I don't know, about how to record stuff, there's a whole documentation here about recording mode. So you can read that and learn new stuff. All right, so enough talking. We're going to be remaking that song from scratch. I'm pressing the new button and we're going to get started. The first thing we're going to do is to create a very simple drum pattern. It's going to help us figure out the tempo of our song, and it's going to be the foundation of our rhythm section for the song. I mentioned earlier we were going to be using samples, so what does that mean? The DPCM samples on the NES, by the way, DPCM stands for Delta Pulse Coded Modulation, it doesn't really matter. They're very low quality samples that the NES supported, so you can have semi-realistic sounds that were recorded in the real world. They appear here at the top of the instrument here. They're kind of a special instrument that's always there. You cannot delete it, but you don't have to use it. If you click on the little waveform here, it's going to bring out the DPCM sample editor. This is where you map a sample to a key of the piano, and whenever you're going to play that key, it's going to be playing that sample. Here, we're going to be mapping the kick drum to C and the snare to D. If I click on the big empty space next to C, it's going to ask me to open a file. DMC files are very standard sample files in the NES chiptune community. That being said, FamiStudio does not provide you a way of creating those files. You're going to have to be using an external tool if you want to do that. On top of my head, there is RJDMC, DPCM, and FamiTracker that are all excellent to make that kind of stuff. But for the purpose of this tutorial, you can just use the samples I am providing you. They are in the tutorialassets.zip, and the link is in the description below. Here I'm just going to select the bass drum, and I'm going to be mapping the snare to C2. Excellent. You can also double click on a sample to change some properties like the pitch, that kind of stuff. We're not going to be doing that right now. Also, if you made a mistake, you can always drag a sample up and down and just remap it to a different note. Now we're ready to create our first pattern. If I click next to the DPCM channel, it's going to create a new pattern with a very generic name. You can always rename stuff by double clicking on it. This is also true for instruments or almost anything. Also, you can change this color if you want. It's always good to keep things organized like this. Now, if you look at the bottom part, you're going to see a bunch of little faint dash line and a bunch of darker lines, full lines. I'm going to explain all of that very, very soon. That being said, for now, what we're going to do, we're going to be enabling note snapping here. If it's not enabled, please enable it on your side. What it's going to do is going to ensure that we're snapping to whole notes here. It's a lot easier to enter a note and not be super careful. Here I'm just going to enter a C2 at every beat. So here we have 4 notes. And we can give this a listen by pressing play. All right, sounds good. When you press the space bar or play, it's going to play for where that yellow line is, which I call the seek bar. To play from the beginning of the song, you can always do shift space. Another way is control space, which is going to play from the current pattern, which also happens to be the beginning of the song here. Now, before we get any further, we're going to be making a little detour to talk about tempo. And even before that, we're going to be changing our project properties. If you notice, the tempo of our song is a little bit too slow right now, the little kick drum that we've set up. So here in the project properties on the right, where it says Untitled Unknown, one thing we can do is to double click. And these are very global project properties. We can give our project a name and write the author. And this is where you would select your expansion audio. NES cartridges sometimes came with expansion chips to add extra audio channels to make a richer, fuller song. And you can also use these features in FamiStudio. But right now we're not going to do that, but this is where you would select that. Also, if you come from more of a FamiTracker background and you enjoy the way tempo worked in FamiTracker, this is where you would enable that option to switch to FamiTracker tempo mode. But right now we're going to leave everything just as is. Same concept, if you double click on a song, you're going to see the song properties and you can give your song a name. And the first thing we're going to do is make the song shorter. Right now, the song has a length of 16, and this represents the number of pattern in a song. Right now, it goes from 0 to 15, so length is 16. We want to get that down to 10. Let's do that. Now we have a shorter song. That's all we need for this tutorial. Now we want to talk about tempo. Tempo is definitely not intuitive in FamiStudio, so bear with me. The NES runs at 60 FPS, so that means 60 times per second we get to update the sound. So that means if we want even notes, there is only a finite number of BPM that we can achieve. So now if we zoom on the piano roll here, the little faint dash line, they separate frames. And after 10 of those little dash line, you're going to see a full gray line, which these 10 frames represent a note. And after 4 notes, there's going to be a small black line. This represents a beat. So 4 notes is a beat. And after 16 of those notes, or 4 beats, we're going to have a pattern. So this is what our number here. We have 10 frames per note, 4 notes in a beat, and 16 notes in a pattern, or 4 beats in a pattern. Same thing. Now, if we want to increase the tempo, all we have to do is to reduce the number of frames in a note. So the NES is going to wait less long between each note, so it's going to appear to go faster. And so here we have 150 BPM, and that's what we want. So I'm going to press OK. It's going to ask me if you want to resize. I'm going to say yes. Now, if you look closely, there's only 6 frames in a note, and this is what we want. Now, the pattern here only has 16 notes, or 4 beats. This is a little bit too short for me. It's like a 4/4 bar, if you want. I would want to have 2 bars or 2 measures in a pattern. This is the right balance for the song I'm creating. You want to try to find the pattern size that kind of maximize the reusability in your song, and it's not too annoying to manage, because very small patterns are super annoying to manage. And here I'm just going to add the extra kick drum notes that are missing. Now we have the right tempo and we have the right pattern length, and we can proceed. Now we can start entering our real drum pattern. The first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to change the snapping precision to 2, because that's all we need for the drum. And it's going to allow me to be a little bit more clumsy when I click with the mouse. So here, nothing fancy. I'm just going to be doing it with the mouse. There's no need to break out the MIDI keyboard or anything fancy. There you go. Good enough. Now we have our little drum pattern here. It's a bit short, so we want to be replicating that pattern at least 4 times to cover our entire verse. here you can just move patterns around and drag them like this, very easy. To create an instance of a pattern, as you drag, you hold Control, and it's going to show you a little link icon. An instance of a pattern, what I mean by it is a copy of a same pattern that's kind of linked together. So if I edit one, it's going to edit the other as well. And you can see if they have the same name and the same color and are on the same channel, they are essentially the same. If I rename one or change its color, both of them change as well. So that's good. So I can do this 4 times. And now I have my entire drum part for the verse. Now that we have our drum beat, we're going to start working on the bass. For the bass, we're going to be using the triangle channel. And also we're going to be using that default instrument one that was created when we created the project. For now, we're not going to worry about instruments. We're just going to be using that default instrument for the entire song. We're just going to do a first pass, then we're going to make it sound better later. All right, I'm just going to create a new pattern here, and I'm just going to put a few notes and we'll see what happens. Let's hear how that sounds. You see, we don't really hear the separation between the notes. What's happening is that the triangle channel generates a triangle waveform, and since the pitch doesn't change or the volume doesn't change, that means we don't hear the separation between the notes. So what we're going to do is that we're going to insert a little bit of silence between each of those notes, so that's going to help us hear the attack. What we're going to use is a stop note, which is added by control clicking. And it's going to add this little triangle, and this triangle literally stops the sound, so that means we have 1 frame of silence between each note. Let's give this a listen. Cool, that's what we want. Now we're going to duplicate this because it's annoying to control click like this all the time. I'm going to show you 3 ways of duplicating these notes really fast. They all start by selecting the notes, which is done by right-clicking in the header here. And selected notes, they will have like a little silver border around them. If I do Control C for copy and I move the selection and paste, Control V, I can do this 3 times and I have all my notes. I'm going to undo this and show you 2 more ways. Again, I select, I copy, I move the selection. Here I'm going to do Control Shift and V. Control Shift and V is a special paste. It's like an advanced version of paste. It has a bunch of options, but more importantly, it has a repeat count, so I can repeat 3 times. Easy. I'm going to show you one last way. Again, we select. This time we're going to drag. Whenever we select something, we can drag it and move it around, transpose it. But as we start dragging, if we hold Control, we can create a copy of whatever was selected. So here we can create copy, and we can also transpose at the same time, which is very convenient. Now the bass notes are very regular. It doesn't sound like the drummer and the bassist are on the same page. So I want to synchronize the bass to the kick drum. But the NES only allows us 1 note per channel, so I can't really see what's happening right now on the DPCM channel. The solution is to use this little box here that's called Force Display. What this does is that it's going to display a channel even when it's not the selected one. So you see here I'm toggling between the triangle and the DPCM channel, and I keep seeing like a very faint copy in the background of the other channel, which is exactly what we want. This allows me to kind of delete a few notes just to make sure that the bass and the kick drum are in sync. Cool. A faster way of toggling between channels is to use the digit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to change the active channel to one of the 5 channels. So I can do 3, 5, 3, 5, 3, 5. Also, I can do Control 3 to toggle the force display on channel 3 and Control 5 to change the toggle display on channel 5. Now, much like the drum, we want to duplicate the bass pattern 4 times, but the bass cannot play the same note like the drum. The pitch has to change. It's a musical instrument here. We saw that holding Control while we drag is going to create an instance. Control and Shift is going to create a completely independent copy of that pattern. Here I'm going to call it verse 2. I'm going to create 4 copies that are completely separated. And then we're going to transpose to whatever note we want. Right? So I'm going to show you a few ways of transposing stuff. If you select notes like this, you can simply drag them to transpose them. Also, another way is to select and use the arrow keys. pressing up and down is going to go by one semitone. Control up and control down is going to go by one octave. Same thing, you can go left and right by one frame, control left and control right to go by one beat. I'm going to undo all of this. Here we want to be on F, yes, and one last pattern. There you go. Cool. Now we can start working on the melody. And for the melody, we're going to be using the square one channel. We're going to create a new pattern, same deal. And let's change the color of that instrument to something a bit more colorful. Why not? For this, since the melody is a bit more complex than the bass and the drum, we're going to be using the new recording mode that was added a while ago. Recording mode is enabled by pressing the record button or simply pressing enter. And when you enable recording mode, there's some stuff that's going to turn red, and this is all stuff you should pay attention to for recording. So you're going to see all these letters on the piano, and this tells you which keys of your QWERTY keyboard map to which keys of the piano. On your keyboard, you can only access about 2 octaves and a half at any given time. So if you want to record lower or higher, you can press page down or page up. For me, since I happen to have a MIDI keyboard, I'm going to be using this to record the melody. Another thing that turned red when we enable recording mode is a little magnet here. The snapping precision here is going to tell FamiStudio how many notes to move ahead every time I press a key. This is not a real-time recording mode. This is like a note by note. So here, every time I press a key, it's going to move by 2 notes. I might be silent here. I'm just going to be just recording my melody, so you can just follow along. Here, I recorded, I pressed a key, and it moved two notes ahead. If I want to move ahead without recording any other keys because I need to move to the next beat, I can just press tab. If I make a mistake, I can press backspace to go back. So let me record a rough first pass of the melody. One thing you should notice as well is that the FamiStudio is creating the patterns for you as you record. There you go. I can disable recording mode now because we are done. I'm going to be giving these a name, and we'll give this a listen. Perfect. You see here we have the same problem as with the bass. We can't hear the separation between certain notes, but we're not going to be adding stop notes for now. This problem is going to solve itself when we start adding real instruments. One thing I forgot to mention about recording mode is that unfortunately right now it only works on QWERTY keyboards, so I apologize if you live in France or in Germany and you have some exotic keyboard. It's currently a technical issue that I need to solve, so in the meantime, please switch to QWERTY when you're using FamiStudio. I'm going to be working on that real soon. Now we want to do the harmonies for the melody, and we're going to be using Square 2 for that. What we're going to do first, because we're lazy again, we're just going to duplicate the entire melody, and we're just going to transpose it and fix up the mistake. It's going to be so much faster than recording it again. To create a larger selection in the sequencer here, you can select a pattern and shift-click, and you can make like a rectangle selection. Another way is to right-click on the header to create like a larger selection like this. But here we just want to select these 4 guys here. And I can drag them. Again, I can do Control-Shift to create a copy on the second channel. Here I just lost all my names, so I'm going to need to do that again because they're just new copies. All right, cool. Now I'm going to use the force display option to see the other channel, see square 1, while I'm on square 2, and I'm going to select all these notes. Whoops, I went a bit too far here. And let me zoom in for you. And I'm going to be transposing to a lower note here. And I'm just going to go around and fix some of the mistakes because the key that we're in, some notes are not going to be making sense here. Let's see. There should be an F. This should be C, this should be F. I think we're done. Let's give this a listen. Cool, we did it. Now we're ready to extend the drum and bass all the way to the end of the song. So let's do that. I'm just going to create two new patterns, chorus 1 and chorus 2. Cool. For the drum during the chorus, I want the drum to kind of take a backseat here and just chill. So I'm just going to add a very regular kick drum. I don't want anything sophisticated. And for the second part of the chorus, it's going to be this kind of alternating pattern. Let me just copy that. It's going to be faster. And here I'm just going to create instances of those chorus pattern, and I'm going to recycle our verse drum beat to complete the song. So believe it or not, the drum is 100% done for the song. For the bass, I'm going to create two new patterns as well. Chorus 1 and chorus 2. I can be lazy and just recycle stuff from some other pattern here. Bass is going to be very regular. Whoops, wrong instrument. Zoom. Oops, it's supposed to be F sharp here, G sharp here, and I think I can straight up reuse this for the rest of the course. Let's see how that sounds. Okay, you hear that super annoying chord? Let me tell you about it. You see, when you start a note, it kind of never ends. This is how the NES works. When you tell it to make a certain frequency, it just keeps going. So these notes, they will keep going on forever, and until we make the chorus for real, this is just going to be the sound that we have. So temporarily, we're just going to add little stuck notes to these long notes, and we're going to revisit that later. In the meantime, it's just going to silence whatever's happening here. Perfect. I'm going to duplicate this a couple more times, and there we go. Now we're ready to extend our melody all the way to the end. We're going to create two new patterns, chorus 1, chorus 2. Whoops. Actually, we're going to create even more. Turn around 1, turn around 2. Turn around is going to be that little section that kind of connects the chorus all the way back to the verse. And we're going to actually duplicate those right away as we start editing them. Here, I'm not going to even bother with the recording mode. What I need to input is so simple. Here I want to smoothly slide from the C sharp to the G sharp. And the way we do this is by inserting a slide note. A slide note is created by holding S and dragging up and down on a note. And here you can just connect the end of the triangle to the next note, and it's going to create a very smooth sound that goes from one to the other. All right. Now let's take a look at the turnaround here and add a couple more notes. There you go. How does that sound? Perfect. Now for the second channel during the chorus, we want to have some kind of fast arpeggio to mix things up. So again, I'm going to create two new patterns. And here I will be using recording mode because I have a lot of small notes to input. So I think it's going to speed things up. my MIDI keyboard did not go as high as I wanted, so I'm just going to transpose these notes manually. And I'm going to duplicate this a couple more times. Oops, sorry, I don't think you were zoomed in. Perfect. Believe it or not, we have a rough first pass for the entire song right now. So the next task is going to make it sound better. The next thing we're going to do is that we're going to create proper instrument to try to make the song sound a lot better. But first, what do we mean by instrument? Obviously, the NES cannot sound like a piano or a guitar. What we mean by instrument is simply changing some basic parameter like the shape of the waveform, the volume, the pitch, that kind of stuff. And there's a couple ways we can go about it. I'm going to show you a first way that you should not use, and then I'm going to show you a better way after. The first one I'm going to show you is using the effects track. The effects track allows you changing the volume and the pitch of any given track, any given channel, simply by expanding the little, by clicking on the little triangle here. For example, here I can change the volume. The default volume is 15, and I can just lower that as much as I want. And let's give that a listen. Here the volume is changing. To delete an effect value, you can just right-click. If you want to delete a lot of effects value, you can do a special delete by pressing Ctrl, Shift, and Delete when you have a selection. And you can tell it just to delete the volume, for example. So another thing we can affect is the pitch. We can make something sound a bit out of tune. Here. If we wanted to do this on every single note, it would be extremely tedious to start playing with the volume and the pitch of every note. It would be a lot of work, and that's not what we want to do. A better way to do this systematically is to use the instrument envelope. The envelope of instrument are these 4 little squares that are next to every instrument in the Project Explorer. They're respectively the duty cycle, the volume, the pitch, and the arpeggio. These represent parameters that you can affect over time for a given instrument. So if I click on the volume here, we're going to see that right now I just have a default volume of 15, which is the maximum volume for an instrument. What I can do is that I can resize this envelope and do something like this. Now every time I play a note of this instrument, it's just going to follow this curve that I just draw. It's going to move along by 1 column every frame, every 1/68 of a second. And I can do fancy things like have a looping section by dragging in the second row. So I can do something like a tremolo. Something like that. Even better, I can add a release point by right-clicking on the second row. So it's going to get stuck in that looping section until I release the piano key, and then it's going to jump to that end section. See? Now let's try to make something. I'm just going to delete this. To delete an envelope, you can just right-click on the little icon, and it's going to become gray again. Now let's try to create a more proper instrument. We're going to call this lead verse 1, and we're going to enter a more proper volume envelope. The default volume of 15 is very, very loud, so you probably want to avoid that. Here I'm just creating something that kind of goes down with time, and something that's not too loud. And here I'm going to set a loop point and a release point. So it goes down to 1, but never goes down to 0. And also I'm going to be using the pitch envelope. The pitch envelope, it can be used to do something like this, to sound out of tune. But a more practical use is to create something like a vibrato. Here I'm just going to, after 30 or so frame, I'm going to try to draw something that resembles a kind of a sine wave. And I'm going to make it loop. This, oops. See? So after a little bit of time, it starts vibrating, which sounds really cool. Another thing you can affect is the duty cycle. The duty cycle affects the shape of the square wave that gets generated by the NES. 0 sounds very nasal. 1 sounds a little bit less nasal. 2 is like a 50% square wave. It sounds very perfect. And 3 sounds exactly like 1, so I'm not going to play it. But one thing we can do is that we can also have this change over time. So we can go from 1 to 0. What it does is that it creates some kind of an attack. It kind of sounds like a keyboard or something. So we're going to be using that for our lead instrument. What we're going to do as well is create a second instrument for the instrument creating the harmony. We're going to be calling it lead verse 2. And we're going to be copying the envelopes because we want to reuse those. So what you can do is you can just drag from the pitch envelope to the other instrument, and it's going to ask you if you want to copy. Here I'm copying the volume envelope as well, and the duty cycle. What I'm going to do is just change this from, instead of the duty cycle going from 1 to 0, it's going to go from 0 to 1. So you see these two, they kind of sound a little bit different. The arpeggio envelope we're going to use later. Now, how do we replace the red instrument that we've been using all this time by these new super cool instrument we've just created? Well, it's very easy. You just select all the verse and you drag the instrument on top of it, and it's going to change color. Let's do that for the second channel. Cool, and let's give this a listen. Oops, sorry, I was soloing on the first channel. Notice that little vibrato kicking in after a while? Pretty cool, huh? I'm going to be deleting these little stop notes that we added to stop the super annoying sound. And that's pretty much it for the verse. So the general rule should be that if you can do something with an instrument envelope, that's what you should do. You should reserve the effects track for these kind of one-off thing or global adjustments that you want to do to the volume, that kind of stuff. Now we're going to be working on the chorus. We're going to create a new instrument for the lead chorus part. This instrument is going to be very, very simple. We're just going to set a duty cycle of 2, and we're going to have some kind of very simple volume curve that just goes up with time. Something like this, very simple. We're also going to reuse this little pitch envelope we use. I kind of like having the vibrato on longer notes, so that's nice. So I drag it to the other instrument. I'm going to select all the notes all the way to the end and just drag that new green instrument we created. Now I want you to pay attention. I'm going to press play and pay attention to what's happening around the slide note. I'm actually going to solo the channel because the second channel is super loud, so pay attention. Did you hear something pulsating? What's happening here is that there is the note, the C sharp for the second one is playing, and there's also a new note, the G sharp here. So it's restarting the volume envelope from the beginning at each of those notes, so you can hear the attack of the instrument playing again, that pop, pop. We don't want that. We want a very smooth note that just starts at C sharp and just goes up and ends all the way here. How do we do that? What we can do is that we can remove the attack of a note. The attack of a note is what resets the envelope all the way to the beginning, and it's represented by this little black rectangle at the beginning of each note. So if you hold A and you click, it's going to toggle the attack. You can remove it. So now let's listen to what happens. See? Sounds super smooth. All right, so one thing I just realized we forgot to do is that we had set up during the verse these instruments that have release part, but we never really triggered a release. How do we trigger a release? It's very easy on the piano here. When I release the note, it plays a release part. But in the piano roll, the way to do it is by adding a special release note that is created by shift and clicking. So I'm going to add a few of these release notes whenever the note gets really long. Whoops, wrong part. And something like this. And on the second channel as well. And we're going to hear how it sounds. So let's pay attention here. I'm just going to solo this part. See how the volume decays very nicely here? That's the release envelope. Now let's create an instrument for these little arpeggios during the chorus on the second channel. For this part, I'd like to have some kind of echo. But what do we mean by echo? It's just a channel can only make a single sound, so an echo is really like a second sound, but we can kind of fake an echo by playing a very low volume version of the previous note. I'm going to try to show you what I mean by this. First of all, let's create a new instrument. We're going to call this bleep because, I don't know, it feels like bleep. And we're going to set a duty cycle of 2. And we're going to set a very simple kind of a decaying volume, something like this. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's perfect. And we are going to replace all of those notes by that new instrument. Again, we simply drag and drop like this. Let's try to pick a different color. Cool. Now we're going to create, I'm going to show you 2 ways of creating an echo. One that uses 2 instruments, that is very simple, and one that uses a single instrument, and it's a little bit more involved. So I'm going to create a second instrument that I'm going to call bleep echo. It's going to have the same duty cycle of 2. I'm copying by drag and dropping, and it's going to have a volume of 3. So what I want to do here, I'm going to be disabling snapping because I want to be able to place note at very, very specific location. At the end of every note, I'm going to play for 2 frames the sound of the previous note. See here, it's a G sharp. I'm playing a G sharp after the A sharp. And I'm going to be doing this for every note. I won't do the whole part, but let's hear what it sounds like. I'm going to be soloing. Pretty cool, huh? That's one way of doing it with 2 instruments. I'm going to be undoing all of this. And we're going to be deleting the bleep echo instrument, which had a spelling mistake. And we're going to be adding a release part to the bleep instrument. So I'm going to be setting a loop section at around 4, and I'm going to be releasing this to 4 and 3. Now this is interesting. We just learned that we can have release note by shift clicking, and we just learned that we can disable the attack of a note. Let's see how these 2 interact. If I add a release note here, and I disable the attack of subsequent note, the note is going to remain released until it finds another note that has an attack. So I'm going to undo this. But knowing this, we can actually use the release part to create the echo of the previous note. This is very tedious to do right now. If I were to do it again, I would probably have used copy-paste right from the get-go. But doing it now is it's very tedious. So I'm probably going to fast forward on this part, and we can hear the result at the end. All right, I'm sure I made some mistakes, but let's give this a listen. See, it creates the exact same effect, but with a single instrument. Granted, it's a lot more work. I'm definitely not sure that's worth it, but now you know. Right, now that default red instrument from the beginning is just used by the bass now, so we might as well call it bass. And that's how this instrument is going to remain until the end. Bass, usually the triangle channel doesn't support having volume or any kind of fancy stuff, so this is what it's going to be. So we should be using the noise channel as well. I mean, we're not doing much with it. We should add some kind of hi-hat, some kind of a cymbal sound. This is going to complement the drum part a little bit. The noise channel is very simple. It only supports volume and arpeggio envelope. We're going to talk about arpeggio really soon, but right now I'm just going to create some kind of decaying volume envelope, something like this. It goes down for a while. Yeah, something like this. So on the noise channel, so the noise channel doesn't really play real notes. There's only 16 different noise sounds. So if I scroll on the piano, you're going to hear it keeps repeating. See? So it's up to you to try to find note that kind of sounds good. Best is to look at what other games are doing and figure it out. The arpeggio envelope we didn't talk about, but it's very simple. It's basically the number of semitones that you want to go up or down. For example, if we were to play this instrument on the square channel and do something like this, we would get like a repeating major chord. So it's going to play a C, an E, and a G. But on the noise channel, it can be useful as well to create all kinds of percussion sound. And I truly encourage you to look at what other games are doing, because it's not always super intuitive to figure out what sounds the best. Here I'm just going to be adding a couple of kind of snare sound every time some kind of hi-hat sound every time the snare hits. It's going to be very simple. Oops, I'm on the wrong channel here. Yep, something like this. We can... Oops, I made a mistake. Whoops, again. Cool. And during the chorus, it's going to be a lot simpler. And we're just going to reuse the verse again. Why not? Let's give this a listen. Let's just listen to the drum. I mean, it's not the greatest, but it does help a little bit the drum sound. One last thing I want to do on this song is I want to punch up the bass a little bit. I think it feels a little bit boring right now. So we can just change a few notes and try to make it more interesting. By the way, you can totally edit the song while it's playing. It's really not a problem. Something like this. Add a little bit of a slide note. All right, let's listen to our new bass. All right, I like it. We are almost done. So the one last thing I want to do to this song is to add a little bit of an intro. To do that, we're just going to extend the song length by 1. And we're going to go to 11. And we're going to select all the patterns. And we're going to move them 1 slot to the left. This just freed a spot at the beginning for an intro. So we can create a new pattern called intro 1. Oops, capital. Let's go here. And we're just going to add a couple notes just to get us in the song. Something like this. Cool. And same for the drum. Why not? How does that sound? Cool. Now the problem is that at the beginning of the song, there's going to be like a whole bunch of silence before the song actually starts. So how do we fix this? This is typically done by using a custom pattern setting. And what does that mean? You see where it says 0, 1 in the header here? You can double click there. And you can tell FamiStudio to have a custom pattern setting. And here we don't want to change the BPM or anything. All we want to do is have less notes. We just want 6 of them. We can just say 6 and OK. Now it works really well. It resizes our pattern, but our notes are gone because they were kind of at the end of the pattern. So I'm just going to undo this. I'm going to move these notes at the beginning. And then we're going to do our resize property. This. Then we set to 6 notes. And we have a cool intro now. Now, what problem that's going to happen is that at the end of the song, it kind of loops back all the way to the beginning. And we want to loop back to the verse 1. The way it's controlled, it's by setting the loop point, which is this little arrow that's in the top right corner. You can set the loop point by holding L and clicking. And you can even disable it if you don't want a looping song. So here we're going to set it to verse 1. So that means at the end of the song, it's going to loop back to the beginning, which is what we want. And we might as well copy those kind of notes that we just created to the end of the song, so it's going to be more seamless. Believe it or not, our first version of the song is done. All there is left to do is to create a new version without using samples, and that's what we're going to do next. Now we're going to create a second version of the song, but we're going to replace the drum by a more traditional kind of NES drum kit that doesn't use samples. So we're going to create a new song. We're going to call it Tutorial Without Samples. It doesn't matter. There is no built-in functionality right now to duplicate an entire song, but you'll see it's quite easy. We could use the merge song feature, but we can work around that. All we need to do is to copy the song settings from one song to the other. So 11.6.4.32, 11.6.4.32, sure. And I'm going to select all the patterns from the original song and just paste them in the second song, move the loop point, and boom. We have an entire new copy of the song to play with. First thing we do, we're going to delete anything that's on the noise channel. We're going to redo that entirely. In the interest of saving times, we have to create 3 new instruments here, but yeah, well, it's quite tedious to create, and they're just percussions anyway. There's nothing new you're going to learn from that. So in the tutorial assets, if you click here, you can load an instrument from the FamiStudio project that comes with the tutorial assets. It's called Noise Drum Instruments, and it's a completely empty project that just contains 3 instruments, and we can just load it, and it's going to tell you which instruments you want to import, and we just say yes. That's it. Now we can start laying the new drum. These instruments, by the way, they don't have anything special. They just have volumes and arpeggio. There's nothing really special about them. We could have created them on the spot. Now I'm going to display the DPCM channel, even though we're going to delete it really, really soon. It's just to help me enter the new percussion. This sounds good at G2. I'm just going to add... Whoops, I'm on the wrong channel here. Here I'm basically just entering bass drum everywhere there used to be one on the DPCM channel. Same for the snare. I'm just going to copy it. D3, D3. All right, let's give this a listen. We're going to mute the DPCM channel. It sounds okay. I mean, it's definitely lacking on the lower end. But what we're going to do, we can inject a little bit of cymbals to make it sound a little bit more dynamic, if you ask me. So I'm just going to sprinkle a few of those here and here, and let's give this a listen. Cool, huh? I think it punches it up quite nicely. So here I'm just going to duplicate this 4 times, create a new pattern for the chorus. Here we're going to keep it super simple. We're going to add a little bit of snare. Oops, not like this. Very regular. And yeah, let's use that cymbal sound. How does that sound? Cool, that works. Here we just need to create a chorus too, and we're going to be done. Again, very simple. We're just going to add bass drum where there used to be one. Oops, I'm on the wrong channel again. And snare. And a little bit of cymbal for, whoops, I'm on the wrong snapping. Cymbal for good measure. Not sure about that one. Let's give that a listen. All right, that works. And what do we use at the end? We're going to use the same thing. Now we're pretty much done. We can simply delete all the samples, and we're going to have a second version of the song that doesn't use any samples. Cool. So now that we're done, what should we do with our song? I guess the most natural thing to do would be to export it to a bunch of formats. So the export dialog is here with the export button in the toolbar. WAV and MP3 probably don't need any introduction. You can choose between WAV and MP3, and there's like a billion options you can choose from. Video is definitely an interesting one. It gives you a very nice visualization. It takes a little while to render, but let me show you the end result. It kind of looks something like this. Very cool looking, if you ask me. And another one would be to export it as a ROM if you want to run it on actual real NES hardware. If you have like an EverDrive or something, it's going to look like this. This is obviously running inside an emulator, but it will work on real hardware, believe me. And otherwise, other formats would be FamiTracker, that kind of stuff, but we won't cover that here. So thank you so much, guys. Good job if you made it all the way until the end. So please leave your questions in the comment, or even better, join our Discord. It's pretty empty in there. We need more people sharing their work. Also, please share your work on social media, on Reddit, whatever. And stay tuned. There's a larger selection of tutorials that's going to come in the next couple weeks. All right. Thank you, guys.